My guest today shares a story with us, a story about an experience that her brother had with her father on the farm. Their dad had come in from a long day working in the field, and the landlord had dropped off a watermelon, probably as a gesture. Their dad sat down on the porch, sliced open the watermelon, took a bite, and turned to his son and said, "Bitter, isn't it?" That moment, quiet, layered, and unresolved, has stayed with Susan for decades. It says something about money, about hard work and pride, about silence, and about how much meaning a single sentence can hold. Greetings, this is Carl, and you are listening to another episode of 50 Fires. And my guest today is Susan Werner. You might know Susan from her stunning catalog of albums: folk, gospel, jazz, musical theater. She's written and performed in nearly every genre, and somehow she always manages to sound like herself. What you might not know is how deeply Susan has thought about money, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of values, philosophy, and meaning. Susan shares how her relationship with money has evolved from frugality as survival to this stated desire to have enough wealth to see her values expressed in the world. I loved every minute of this conversation, and I am sure you will too. Let's dive into this conversation about money and purpose with Susan Werner. It'd be fun, Susan. Let's sort of start from, I would be really curious to start from the beginning. What's your earliest memory of money?
I think my earliest memory would have to be walking into church on Sunday, going to mass with my 5 other siblings and my parents in a small farm town in eastern Iowa. And my parents are farmers. And I think my dad walking into church with coins, change in his pocket. And, when you're little, you're only like yay high, right? 2, 3 feet high. And sort of your head at the same, like, level as your father's pocket, and the
Wow.
jingling of money, and that he had money. That's money. That's the sound of money. And then there's also the smell of money. And here's the smell of money. So we're driving down any rural road, gravel road, doesn't matter what road in Iowa, and we'd smell manure on the farm that we're driving past. And we had a farm, right? But it's still like, oh, fresh manure has a certain impact. And Dad would
Somebody
say,
else's.
yeah, someone else's, but right, you smell, and it's
Right.
when it's fresh, it really is pungent, right? And we'd
Right.
all go, oh, and Dad would say, you know what that is? That's the smell of money.
Come on, really?
Well, it takes manure to enrich the soil,
Yeah.
so you grow things, and it's the corn and beans that pay the bills. So
Quick pause here. When Susan talks about the smell of money, in this case, manure, she's doing something we all do all the time. She was anchoring value to something tangible, sensory, and real. These early associations, sound, smell, feelings, shape how we think about money long before we ever realize it. And it's super important to learn to recognize them, because money isn't just math, it's a set of memories. Can you remember that statement? Like in the car, can you remember? Like
yeah,
what did you make of it? Like what were you?
it's the truth.
Yeah.
It's just the truth. I mean, we had of course, manure spreader on the farm, and we didn't drive that so much. The kids didn't drive that, but Dad drove that. But it's a
Yeah.
frank fact of agronomy is you have to enrich the soil, and that was the original deal. Was fertilizer came from your livestock, and then you would run it out to the field in the honey wagon,
Yeah.
And, that was an unpleasant task, but, that's what made the soil, that's what makes the soil rich in sustainable and organic ag. It's often livestock manure instead of chemical fertilizer.
Yeah. So that was the smell, and the sound was the like clink, the sound of change in your dad's pocket going into church.
Hmm.
Interesting. Was this like church where you would pass a pot around and
A plate, yeah,
a plate? Yeah.
sure. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I mean, when we were little, people would put coins in it, right? I mean, this
Sure.
was what, 19, what was I, 5 in 1970, 71. So people
Yeah.
would put folding money or a check or coins if that's what you
Coins.
had. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, was there any, I mean, I'm curious about like what was money like in your home? Any memorable conversations that you remember between your parents or siblings?
My folks were really good about keeping stress from their kids. They just felt
Hmm.
like, my folks are really old school great. Um, and I'm lucky to still have them. Um, But they were old school about the kids can be kids and
Hmm.
we'll worry about this.
Mm.
And I don't think I even knew really, not in any, maybe I felt it a little in the farm crisis in the early 80s,
Hmm.
how close they were to losing the farm.
Mm.
But they did not share that stress with us. And in a lot of ways, that was a real blessing.
Mm. When you say maybe you felt it a bit, do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there were discussions about college and can we keep affording to send kids to college, which was
That
my
you sort of
parents.
just overheard, or were they part of like a intentional conversation?
Not an intentional conversation, not ever. They would
Wow.
never do that.
Wow.
But a feeling of like we already put two kids through school. Now we're putting two more kids through school. Now we're going to put
Right.
you through school. Scholarships were important. But my parents didn't even graduate from high school.
Wow.
They both got GEDs later. But
Wow.
this was a big dream to them that their children should all graduate from college, and we all did.
Wow. Were you I do you wish you would have been included in more of those conversations? It sounds like you're glad that they just let kids be kids. Do you wish you would have been included more?
I think it might have been helpful to know about budgeting and income and when
Mm.
the income came in. We knew that it was a big day when the hogs went out the door to the sale barn, right?
Mm.
I mean, it's not a good day for the hogs, but it's a good.
Right, right, right.
But Dad kind of came
How did
back.
you know? Did you just know because of the activity, or how did you know it was a
Well,
good
that
day?
well, that Dad would come back with a little more of a spring in his step, uh,
Right.
and he would put a check on like on the kitchen table for Mom, like, oh, had a good day. But then he would come in from the field if something went wrong, like a tractor, some part of the tractor or an implement,
Right.
like the rake, the baler, something broke, and he would come in, and he would come in the side door,
Yeah.
and say, "Well, the tractor just, the Minneapolis Moline just broke down," and she would look at him and say, "You're kidding," and he's like, "Nope." Uh,
Uh,
that kind of thing. Um,
yeah.
but again, just I really admire my parents for how they did a lot of those things, and it might have left me a little unprepared in my early 20s when I got out of college, and I'm like, how am I going to make a living as a musician? But I figured
Yeah.
out pretty fast, weddings, bar mitzvahs, society balls. I was a chick singer in a society ball band in my 20s for like gigs in the Hamptons and stuff because I lived in Philly. That was interesting. That was eye opening.
Yeah. What did you learn from that? What was eye-opening?
Well, that a lot of people had a lot of money. Uh, and
Tell me about learning that. Like, I was actually curious, like, when's the first time or maybe the most poignant time that you remember realizing that your family's financial situation was different, better or worse, but just different from other people's?
I have this song called City Kids. which is, from a farm kid's perspective about sort of resenting the city kids. They don't have to do
Mm.
chores. They have like fluffy little dogs with all four legs, right? Um, and I remember visiting one of my Catholic elementary school friends, and I went in. They had like carpet on the stairs. They had carpet on the stairs, and they had like a fluffy little indoor dog. They had like she had a TV in her room. She had her own TV, not just one TV for all of us to watch, but she had her own TV in her
Right.
room. And then here's another marker of money. Early in my experience was the teen line. So there'd be a phone for the house.
Oh,
And then if the family had money, there'd be a separate phone line for the teenagers. So that second phone line was a sign of like there's some means in that household.
yeah. And you remember carpet on the stairs being a thing? Like, wow.
Mhm. And not a runner, like actually carpeted all the way up. It was like, oh, hmm, yeah.
Do you do you remember what that felt like? What I'm always curious about, because I can remember my first experience with that. I don't know if it was my first, but I can remember one of the most sort of meaningful experiences going to a friend's house. My parents were divorced when I was 8, and my mom worked really hard to keep us in great neighborhoods, but we couldn't really afford to be there except for all that hard work. So there wasn't anything extra. And I remember going to a friend's house that had, just I mean, in the neighborhood we lived in was really nice, but I just remember going to a friend's house and just being like, this is how does this work? And I do remember feeling a little, and this is a reflection of me clearly, but I remember feeling a little resent's not exactly the right word, but I even remember a tad bit of disappointment in my own situation a little bit, sort of like, why aren't we doing better? Do you recall any of that
Absolutely.
sort of stuff?
Absolutely. And I love that you're asking these questions because this stuff is really powerful and informative and can even set so much of your path in later life.
Mm.
These feelings about like shame almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Um, I don't, gosh, cars were kind of a marker, right?
Huh. Yeah.
Cars were a marker, like when you got your license, which is a big deal in rural
Yeah.
Iowa, in rural America in general, because you can finally get out of the house.
Right.
Huge, huge.
Can't you
And
like start driving at like 11 in rural? I mean, I know that's how it is in Idaho. Right. Right.
7, yeah.
So,
No, 7.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, you're driving, with a permit at 14,
Right.
right? So you can go to
Yeah.
school, and that's a big, big day, because you
Yeah.
can stop on your way home from school. You can
Yeah.
determine you have agency in the world. Uh,
Right.
but the new cars, right? The kid, the families with money, they'd buy their kids a new car at
Right.
16 was like, wow, wow.
Yeah.
Like we had, we called them Catholic cruisers, like they're four-door sedans, like, Oldsmobile 88 or something. It was always used. But I'll tell you,
Yeah.
used, that was here's a little way that my parents made it, right? Through the farm crisis and other things. They never bought anything new.
Mm.
And dad knew how to fix everything.
Mm.
And I mean, that is my primary memory of my dad is working in the shop, right, in the building that he had for machinery, and being in there and on a roller on his back like a mechanic, and fixing
Right.
something, and all the equipment he kept in the shop to fix things. And there's this game called Life, right? There's this game called Life, which is a board game,
Right.
and it has the little cars. You put the little plastic, the people in there. You pick your spouse and your children, and you buy life insurance or fire insurance. And where there's two outcomes in the game of life. One is the poor farm, and one is millionaire acres.
Oh, that's right.
And my parents bought their first farm when I was 5, and they didn't get help to do it. And slowly, slowly, through thrift and industry, they owned that 160 acres outright, and they have wound up at millionaire acres,
Mm.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
and fabulous. And we know friends. I have friends from growing up who lost their farm at various points, and my parents are kind of they're a success. Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Here's a story that I heard later, but my older brother Dave told me. He must have been like 8 or so, and the landlord stopped by on the farm we were renting. And I would have been like 4 or 3, so I wouldn't remember this exactly. But the landlord stopped by on a summer day, and he said, "Hey, Dave, come here." And he rolled down his window and he gave Dave a watermelon, right? And he said, "Hey, you know, you go ahead and take this into your folks." And Dave was like, "Okay, okay, okay, great, thanks, right? Great." So Dave told me later this when he sat down on the porch with a slice of watermelon that mom cut up, and he sat next to dad, and dad was eating a slice of watermelon, and Dave was eating a slice of watermelon. Beautiful summer day, right? And this was the watermelon the landlord had given Dave. And dad looked at Dave and said, "Bitter, isn't it?"
Oh, man.
Oh.
Wow.
Because those deals were hard. I'm not sure it was halfsies on everything that all your income. I'm not sure it was
Yeah.
half, but it was not nothing. It was a lot, I think.
Yeah. What do you make of that now? Like with the benefit of a bunch of time and space and experience, like what do you make of that statement from your dad?
You know, um, this conversation is really moving me to talk about these things. But it makes me feel how, my parents really did deliver, right? They really worked
Yeah.
hard and they kept a lot of things to themselves. And, if things have gone well for you at all, sometimes it's because somebody went out of their way, and maybe they even spared you the favor they did you was not worrying you. Um, and yeah, my folks did that. They did that for us.
That's an amazing story.
Something, isn't it? No.
We'll be right back with more from 50 Fires. Welcome back to 50 Fires. How would you describe your sort of maybe summarize your beliefs about money early in your life? Like just maybe before you left to Philly. Like how would you summarize if you had to in a word or two?
Um, I think probably I didn't know how I didn't know how to do it, but I knew that you shouldn't take on debt.
Hmm.
I did know that,
Mm.
and that's been helpful going into a life in the arts,
Mm.
because income is intermittent, right? Constant effort is constant, but reward is intermittent,
Right,
in
right,
all
right.
ways, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, for money to come in, sometimes it comes in, and you got to hustle from day one. I do think that aversion to debt has
Huh.
been helpful,
Mm.
uh, and it also takes a certain humility, like not getting drawn into sort of invitations to create sort of a bonfire for your own vanity. The idea that you can hire, record promotion, you can, hire a band and sound great, right? There's so much ego candy put before you if you have talent,
Mm.
and um,
Hmm.
because that's how many other people around you make their living. They're going to amplify, right, your career and your talent and visibility for what you do, and these temptations will be put before you, right? And it's hard to say no to some of that, and to trust that making a lot will matter more in the end than making one thing and have it break through.
Mm.
Uh,
Hmm.
because you will break through over time if you are patient and make good quality stuff over time.
Hmm.
Um, but it's really tempting to like load up your credit card, right? The 80s were the
Mm.
time of like, here's your credit card, you can run up, woo, wee.
Right.
Uh, and
Right.
Yeah, being able to say no to that. Um, Man, maybe there's some good fortune there. Like I'm just not susceptible to casinos or, I work too
Yeah.
hard for my money. I hate to see it go.
Hey, let's pause for just a moment here. I just want to point something out. When Susan talks about resisting the lure of credit card debt and big spending on what she refers to as ego candy, which I think is just such a great term, she's describing something that comes up all the time in the literature. She's talking about delayed gratification in a world that sells fast fame and easy money. In a way, this is the artist's version of resisting lifestyle creep, holding the line, like saying, look, this is enough here, betting on longevity and not counting on lightning. Let's jump back into my conversation with Susan. Yeah, that concept of ego candy is super interesting.
It's right
I've
there.
been calling it success porn
No doubt.
lately. Just like the people waving their hands telling you there's just do these three simple things and
They're always simple,
yeah.
aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. Given that background and sort of your experience since then, how would you define enough?
That's a wonderful question. Enough feels like I'm able to pursue the next creative challenge
Hmm.
that I choose for myself, right? That it's not imposed on me out of a need to crank up some bank quick. Um, that I can choose it as I want to bring myself to it, and I'm at liberty to carry it out.
Hmm.
Um, and enough means, you know, it, enough means you have enough money to bring your creative endeavors to fruition. And in my line of work, it often takes a record, and that takes a little money.
Hmm.
And I try really hard to do that in house, like not do a GoFundMe, like not seek outside sources.
Hmm.
Um, and people don't necessarily know that, right? They don't know where the money comes from, but they know when something is good, and you may not have to spend a lot of money to do it, but you're going to have to exercise discipline to do it. You may have to do more of it yourself than you think, instead of having somebody else, oh, can they do this guitar track for you? No, you may actually have to sit there and do it. But the ability to carry out your own creativity and come up with it, choose it, right? Choose the subject matter, and then carry out the process that gets it to people. That's enough. And I'll tell you, I've been working on this musical, Bull Durham the musical. It's based on the MGM film, and there are rewards and challenges to that. The reward is when other forces come together and the budget comes together and it gets out to the public. It takes a lot of
Hmm.
money, right? More money than certainly I have.
Right.
But I mean, we have choreography and set design and, great designer, great
Right.
director. That takes money. But that kind of thing comes together outside of my own financial resources.
Hmm.
So to choose something like that, it's probably I find it healthy for myself anyway to work on my own creative endeavors alongside a large spaceship like
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
because the rewards of that are not guaranteed and much of it is out of my control. And if I put too much of my own, if I invest too much of my own sense of self in the outcome of that thing, wow. I mean, that is really distressing. And I've been at this long enough to know now to kind of, okay, I see. This is over here, and this is what I can bring forward and know that I can bring forward. So to balance those, the big and sort of the large and the local, right?
Hmm.
Helps me to feel like I'm managing this in a way that motivates me and is rewarding.
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautifully said. Can you think of a time when you really invested, and by that I simply mean any form of capital, time, money, energy, attention
This
in some.
musical is like, oh yeah. I mean, any
y-
writing a musical is like it's crazy. And you think about it's Everest, it's Mount Everest. It's
Yeah.
impossibly hard. And it requires other people to pull it off.
Yeah.
And it's so many people, so many songwriters, right? Have Paul Simon, Sting. right? It's just so friggin' hard. Uh,
Yeah.
um, and you put in so much time and so much effort. Like I must have in my iTunes, I must have like 400 tunes, right? And how many are in the score? 18, right? I mean, there's a lot of
Wow.
revisions of things, but honestly, like so many tunes burned on it.
Yeah.
And so for that, not to see the light of day on Broadway yet, it's like you got to be kidding me.
Yeah. And it's still in the works.
Still in the works. Yeah, it's going to go up this year at the Paper Mill Playhouse in Millburn, New Jersey, in October. So I hope some of your listeners get a chance to see it.
Yeah. Have you, I'm curious about, have you had experiences in the past where you've invested that, like heart and soul, into something and then it didn't work?
Well, yeah, I did a. This isn't quite the same because a musical is its own beast, but
Yeah.
I did like a chamber music. I don't know why this happens. Like I guess Billy Joel did like a classical thing. It's like this moment that you think, right?
Right.
Because you've had some success and you're talented. You think, oh, I'm gonna right. I'm gonna do the thing. Like write up these chamber music arrangements of pop classics from the early '70s, and worked really hard on it. And I thought there were some inventive things, some sort of mashups that were interesting, like "Hazy Shade of Winter" with Vivaldi's "Winter," right? To put this,
Mm-hmm.
mashup.
Right.
And my agent calls me and says, "I don't think you should even put this out." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I just no one wants this or needs this." And I was like, "What?" It was crushing, right?
Yeah.
But it was also humbling in this way, like, okay, remember what your primary business is, right? Ego candy, right? Or thinking, oh, you can just leap from one mountaintop to the next.
Right.
Like, well, maybe not all mountaintops, right? That people really want to see you
Yeah.
do. Was it Christopher Reeve who said a secret to success in the arts is finding the thing you like doing that people like seeing you do?
Yeah. Yeah. That's like a Venn diagram, that the overlap of those two circles.
Exactly. And when you wander
Yeah.
outside of that, maybe things don't go quite so well.
Yeah. Here's a question I'm curious about. What's something about your relationship with money that you're still trying to figure out or resolve?
I do think it might be good to have a lot of it. And I've never really thought that way until recently. But
Tell me
it's
about that. Like what happened? What changed?
uh, I'm seeing how money supports expressing values.
Hmm.
And I am seeing, I have some friends with some resources, and some of them are getting very involved in women's professional sports, which I
Mm.
think is great.
Mm-hmm.
And um, seeing what women's sports does for women's lives and everyone's lives. Um, there's an advocacy component going on
Hmm.
now as it moves
Hmm.
toward profitability, and is even beginning to be profitable in new ways. But
Hmm.
to see how money as an engine to um, move things forward in a way that you believe in your heart of hearts is good. That I think maybe the word is envy. I envy that, and I now desire that for myself in a new way. And that I've always been busy making things, and that was fully rewarding, and still is honestly fully rewarding. But I do see what that does, and I wouldn't mind if one of my endeavors brought in some, you know, luscious, generous bank, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Is
Especially
that
in,
something you're trying to work yourself into being comfortable with?
I think
Like,
I
is there
could.
some hesitancy, or are you just like,
No, I think I
I'm
could be
totally fine
good
with it
with.
now?
No, I'm fine with a
Yeah.
lot of money arriving now. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just to clear that up,
Yeah,
that's
just to
you're
clear that
fine.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fine now.
Yeah.
But it would also be fine now
Was it
because
not fine in the past?
yeah, I
Hmm.
think that there was this sense, and it could be, being a good 4-H'er, being a good farm girl, being a good Catholic school
Mhm.
girl. Like, you really profit shouldn't be your primary motive,
Of
right?
course.
That goodness
Yeah.
is laid in there for a lot of us. That you being good, and your feeling of being good, that's the currency that matters most. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, wait, actual currency matters as well. And
Yeah.
yeah, so right.
Yeah.
Working through some of that might have been part of the
Just like
process
this
here.
puritanical, or what do they call this, Catholic guilt, or this almost like this puritanical thing where money has some, I mean, we've all been, I know I was taught there's some version of, I mean, it's just, you only have to leave out one word, like money is the root of all evil. It only involves leaving out one word, right? The love of money is the root of all evil. It quickly gets to the point, because I know it took me years to be, and I'm still not sure I'm exactly there. Like, if I answer that question, is there something I'm trying to resolve? It would probably be very similar. Like, I'm okay with having slack in the system, maybe a little bit of margin, a little bit of excess, a little bit of, I mean, I'm even practicing that lately. You know, when there's a little bit of extra money in the checking account, like, what if we just left it there for just a minute? Like, we don't have to grab it and put it over here and hide it. Like, like just be okay with a little bit of slack in the system.
Yeah. And
Mm,
what if what if the money started happening for the people who prioritize it least?
Yeah.
Right? If you're like, for those of us that are fairly well adjusted around money, it's like we're actually the people that should have a lot of it.
Yeah. 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 That's come up. That's come up a couple times in this. In fact, thinking about it, it's come up twice now with women on the show about the expression, want, like, saying, I'd actually like to have a lot of money right now, and maybe there's something in the air right now about seeing wealth being used for power, and that idea of, like, I'd like to express my point of view, which I happen to believe is good, came up. Kara Swisher, the technology writer, said the same thing. She's like, I'd really like to have more money so I could express my point of view.
Yes, point of view.
Um,
Exactly right. That sounds right.
yeah. If somebody had like a perfect record of your spending,
You mean like a complete record or
a
a
complete, yeah, a complete record of your spending for, and we'll just go with the last 10 years.
uh
What would it say about you?
uh,
What would you hope it would say about you?
she lived within her means.
Really?
Yeah, that should be the epitaph on my headstone.
Yeah, it sounds, yeah, that's we've touched on this a few times. It's yeah. Yeah.
uh,
She lived within her
she
means.
lived within her means. She hovered around her goal weight. I mean, there's uh, uh, let's see, what would it say? Um, she maybe could have gone a little more crazy, with maybe pleasures, right? She could have gone ahead and helped herself to, uh,
Is there anything you wouldn't want people to know about that record? Like, was there anything you'd be embarrassed about? Like, oh, I didn't spend enough, or I spent too much on chocolate cake, or like anything that stands out.
I have a song about cosmetic surgery, and I actually went ahead and got Botox twice. So there's,
As research for the
well,
song.
yeah, and vanity.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um, and so I haven't done it since. It's been a while, but I got a Groupon. Get this. I got a Groupon and I went and
Stop
got,
it.
no, listen. And of course I got a Groupon and I went to this spa, on the West Loop. And, so I said, okay, here's what I want to do. I want to do the 11s. I have a drag queen, performing drag queen brother. And he was like, you got to get your 11s done. I'm like, what are my 11s? He's like, this right here. It's your 11s. I'm like, oh, right. Okay. So I get a Groupon and I go to the spa in the West Loop, and I go in and I say, okay, I have a Groupon. So I'm thinking probably I need to get rid, do something about the 11s. And the esthetician says, oh yeah, the 11s. Yep. And I said, no, I don't have another Groupon, but if I had another Groupon, what would you do next? I'm not kidding. She hands me a mirror and she says, oh, honey, just look at yourself. Like there's so
Stop it.
much Comedy gold. I
Oh,
loved
oh,
this.
honey, you'd need 100 Groupons.
Oh, right, right, exactly.
Stop it.
So great.
So, what do you do? What do you do with that?
I mean,
You
I
write a
told
song about it, I guess.
well, you share it. I mean, it's just so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Well, so good. What if you had a chunk of money that was specifically allocated to spend on happiness? What, how would you spend it?
It would in part be it would in part be right away. It would in part be to see some people do
Hmm.
well. Some
Hmm.
people I would want to attend to their medical, physical situation
Mm.
in ways that I know would, or that I hope would address some of what I know they are concerned about, and that would make me happy. To go beyond that, oh yeah, massage, 90-minute massage. Touch me, rub me, rub me, rub me. There's nothing, there's no quicker sense of like things are going well. Things are really going well in your life. Someone is rubbing you. If I could do that
Yeah.
every day, that's it. That's great. Rub me. Come on, come on, come on, rub me, babe. I mean, yes.
It's
Think about it.
perfect.
Is there anything better? Nothing.
Perfect. Well, maybe a mountain bike ride, but
But then what do you want afterwards? You want to be rubbed.
yeah, yeah. So so if you had money to spend, it was specifically for you to go buy happiness. The first thing that comes to mind is helping some other people, and then the second is a massage.
And then a Rivian. Okay, so there's these electric trucks, right? They're
Yeah,
built
yeah,
downstate. They're built in Illinois.
yeah.
And I've just been lusting after a Rivian since they came out. Um, they're just
What is it? Tell me
awesome.
about that. If you were gonna, so you're gonna go, you get a chunk of money, you have to spend it on happiness. You go buy a Rivian. Why?
Because it makes me happy. Because here's the thing, too, right? If you grow up in a small
Yeah,
town, like cars, right? Farm town, like the vehicle, the new truck, right?
yeah,
That's a sign of success. Like our
right.
used car in the church parking lot. But the Rakers, they always had a new truck,
Yeah,
right? Oh, they always had the latest, big, fancy. It's like,
yeah.
right? So I
And
think that's
The Rivian's just your new F-150.
it's cooler
Yeah,
than an F-150. It's just like
yeah,
I made it.
yeah.
I can't charge it. I don't think I can charge it anywhere in my hometown, but
Right,
but still,
right.
I'd
You can't
charge it in
drive it home.
Dubuque just so I could
Uh,
roll in looking cool.
Right, right, right. Susan, when it comes to money, is there anything you're afraid of?
Yeah, I'm afraid of. I think as I see what it's going to take, to care for my parents, like, how much they might need, depending how some things go. I'm pretty sure they have enough bank to do it, but you do think about, wow, like if certain eventualities come to pass, like, oh no, like that will those things, like you can almost later life takes a lot of money. The last chapter in life takes a lot of money. That I think that'd be good to have a lot of money for that. Um, I think it's also why people get bolder as they get up in years. Is like if the minute you know that you have enough, then I think just some people just become so committed with their advocacy with money. The minute
Hmm.
you know you have enough.
How would you know you had it? Like, where is that line? Like, how would you know you had enough?
I really should look into like what exactly it would take for long-term care in extreme circumstances, right?
Uh, uh,
That's the thing. I think mental illness worries all of us, Alzheimer's, dementia, that kind of care. And this is very real. We have a nasty setup in this country with medical care. We do. It's nasty, man. It's so nasty, and it's limiting. If I can risk a political statement, it's limiting. It's limiting in terms of creativity and creativity
Mm.
entrepreneurship and
Mm.
in terms of small businesses. If people could, right, if we could be set free to do what we wanted to do in terms of starting a small business or any kind of business, we didn't have to worry about providing healthcare for ourselves or our employees. Wow, wow, what we would do, right? I mean, it takes capital to do it, but to take that big one off the table.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, my partner has, health, has good health insurance and can share that with me.
Yeah.
That's something we don't often talk about as
Yeah.
among peers. Like, we see somebody doing well, and we're like, oh, well, of course they must have this advantage or that advantage, or we resent them because we don't have that advantage. But actually, we don't know inside anybody's life what the money is. So maybe we could let up on the comparison thing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I just finished editing some of the final essays for my new book, and one of the big ones was about comparison. Just that we don't really know. Like we're like 3 or 4 assumptions deep because we think somebody might have a lot of money based on the fact that they're driving the Rivian, right? But it turns out we don't know. We don't even know if it's theirs, right? But we certainly don't know how it was purchased, how it was financed, where it came from.
We certainly don't know that they bought it because they were given this money and forced to spend it on happiness.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know any. We don't know any of it, and then we make these huge assumptions about they must be wealthy or they must be happy or they must have a lot of money, and we don't know anything. And then the flip side too, right? Like people make big mistakes, and you learn about it. You don't have the benefit of knowing anything about how that mistake happened or why, or
Mhm,
right. I
mhm.
think we could all do a little bit less in terms of the judgment or comparison.
Comparison is the death of joy. Mark
It's
Twain,
true.
right?
It's
Wasn't it Mark
true.
Twain? I think.
I think it's somebody like that. I'm actually curious if we go back to you mentioning inconsistent cash flow.
Yeah.
What was that? That was exactly what I expected as soon as I said it's inconsistent cash flow.
Tolerance for that, right?
Yeah, how did you
Tolerance for
develop
that.
tolerance for that? I'm curious about that. It's
Again, I
because
think
it's so
again, I
it's
think
so
my
many people's
folks.
reality.
Again, I think it's my folks. Dad always said, "Farming's
Oh,
a
I guess
gamble.
you're
Farming's
right.
a
They
gamble."
had inconsistent cash flow. They just like the gig economy and the artists, but it's the original gig economy.
It's called rain. It's called snow.
Yeah,
It's called
yeah,
hail. It's called
yeah.
tornadoes.
Right. Dust.
Yeah. You didn't know what kind of year you were going to have. So that's another reason you live within your means, is because you really don't know that money's coming in.
Wow, interesting.
There's no
Yeah,
paycheck. There's no stub at the end of every 2 weeks.
it's,
No.
it's the original gig economy.
Yep. Yep.
That's super interesting. I never really made that connection to art
Well, and I
and
don't know that, I don't know how many people had, that kind of experience, growing up on a working farm, but you heard me say, like, when it comes to,
right.
how am I going to pay
Yeah,
the bills? I mean, you have, it does take hustle. It does take hustle, right? You got to seek out work and put yourself forward in ways that you have to overcome your own humility in a certain way, and say, yeah, I'm good at this. I can do this. Yep. Yep. You should hire me. Well, I'm going to deliver. And to be able to call upon yourself to deliver, and so that people know they can count on you to deliver, and they hire you to sing in the society ball band, sing at the bar mitzvahs, sing at the weddings, right? And then I had a motto in 1993: weddings free in 93. I wanted to be free of those kinds
uh,
of jobs, right?
oh wow.
So that
Well, when did
my
you make that motto?
like 1992 or something, right? But
Okay. Right. Yeah.
that my own songwriting and concertizing would pay the bills instead of needing to augment my income from those other sources.
Yeah.
And something I tell artists starting out is, maybe give yourself a ramp, right? An on ramp,
Right.
or like a
Right.
takeoff,
A
like a
bridge.
yeah, or like a runway for a plane, right? The plane
Yeah.
can't take off, like, it's not a helicopter, right? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
O'Hare is like, I don't know, 7 miles long, right? What you're
Yeah.
trying to do is to, over time, accumulate enough velocity to get up, right?
Yeah.
And that your income may take a while to develop in terms of people knowing what it is you do and being able to build a business. So to give yourself some time, some trajectory to get up there and work towards it instead of being like, I haven't made it and I quit. Well, maybe you can taper, right? Maybe it isn't all or nothing. Another thing I tell young artists is, especially touring songwriters or musicians, is to build a drivable empire. And what I mean by that is, when I lived in Philly, um, you know, I could drive, right, without flying because that costs money. If you can drive yourself, it's going to cost less. Um, Drivable business from, say, Boston down to DC. And that right there, I 95, I mean, that's maybe 100 million people, right? But to focus on that instead of taking a gig in, Spokane, what do you want to do that for? Like, just focus on what you can get to and get back to and build.
Mm.
Almost like taking one of those old, like, what are they called? Protractors, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
With the
Compasses, the
yeah,
little, yeah,
right. Yeah, you have the thingy, and then the pencil, and
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
if you say
right.
a 5-hour drive, right, or a 7-hour drive, like from Chicago, drivable empire. What is that? Indianapolis, Columbus, Ohio, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Madison, Minneapolis, St. Louis, right? Like, it's possible to build a business that you can get back to, invest in, and over time see return to you instead of taking a flyer on San Diego,
Yeah, yeah. And is that what do you do when you get? I mean, do you still have moments when you get worried about the the variability of the income, the nature of your income?
I'll tell you, I used to worry about it more. And then, like, the pandemic
Hmm.
was a right big marker for everybody, right? Big chapter delineator kink. And right, all the live gigs went away.
Mm.
And I had really good help from my social media coordinator who said, you need to go online, and you need to go online right now, this Sunday. Like, this was Friday, right? March 13th or whatever it was. And she's like, you need to
Mm.
go online this Sunday. And I'm like, I don't really have anything to present. She said, it doesn't matter. Just get out there, start doing a show every week. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah. I'm like, this is only going to go on for 3 weeks. She said, right. But even so.
Right.
Okay. So I began doing, and there's a reason I'm bringing this up. So I began
Yeah.
doing Susie on Sundays. Like, at some point, I figured out I'm a Sunday night act. What does that mean? When you're younger and you're sexy, not that I'm not incredibly sexy, but
Right.
but when you're maybe a hotter commodity and whatever, you are a Friday or Saturday night act, right? There comes a moment when you're sort of the nostalgic favorite,
Mm.
and you can play Sundays because it's a
Mm.
little more of a family night, a little more of a church day, right? Something
Yeah.
sentimental, maybe, but
Yeah.
just the proposition's a little different. And so, being on every Sunday night, coming up with a different theme every Sunday, carrying this out. What I'm saying is, I was able to pivot,
Huh.
and I had a great year, the pandemic year. Honestly, a great year because I had no travel expenses.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
But if you learn that you can rely on yourself,
Huh.
then you can take more risks because you believe in your own ability to deliver, no matter what the terrain. There's a saying about
Huh.
throw your knapsack over the wall and make yourself go get it, right?
Mm.
With a creative endeavor, that means like taking on a topic that you didn't think you could pull off. Um, but being willing and knowing that you can take on a challenge and that you will put in the effort, and that you're willing to fail enough to make it fly. Um,
Mm.
that's a good feeling. I feel like I can count on myself to be pretty nimble no matter what comes in.
So that's super interesting. So you don't worry so much about the variability because you figured out that's just reality and you know how to navigate it,
Or I can count on myself to scramble till I get it.
to figure it out.
Yeah, and I'm sort of, surprised I'm just telling you this out the front of my face, but I am. Like, I'm pretty confident I can figure out
Yeah.
what's next if, the world ends. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Or at least I know that I'll put my shoulder to the wheel and do it. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it may take a while to figure it out. But
Yeah.
here's something. This isn't exactly about money, but I liked this.
Hmm.
When I visited a friend of mine who is, she wouldn't tell you she's a rocket scientist, okay?
Hmm.
But she works in a NASA research facility, okay? And when you say, "Are you a rocket scientist?" She says, "No, I'm a thermonuclear dynamicist," or, something.
Right, 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 right. Of course. I've got
Okay.
one of those too.
Yeah,
One of my
right. Okay.
friends. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Fine.
Nuclear scientist,
Exactly.
whatever.
In space, but you're not.
Yeah.
Okay. What? Okay.
Whatever.
And she took us on a tour she took some friends on a tour of the NASA research facility in like Hampton Roads, Virginia, I think.
Huh.
And it was amazing, right? And you go into the like the anechoic chamber, which has no reverb. You go into the chamber that has endless reverb. You see the little
Wow.
models of missiles being worked on and with heat and wind. But
Wow.
what she said was that in NASA, if I understand this right, in NASA, they kind of know about how long it's going to take them to figure something out, like an unknown. Like, it'll take us about 9 months. I'm like, what? And she said,
Right.
"Oh yeah, we know it'll take us the thing we don't know. It'll take us about 9 months to figure it out."
Wow.
What?
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have that timeline right, but the idea that you can know that you're going to get there
Yeah.
is kind of amazing, and it's
Yeah.
I think there's a comfort in it. Um, if the moment you figure out that you can count on yourself to do it, it kind of takes away some of that that I mentioned earlier, which really comes
Yeah.
from being in my 20s and not knowing that I could do it. And boy, things were skinny. Boy, things were skinny. I lived in some crap apartments, man. I lived in some
Yeah.
crap apartments, God, and drove cars
Yeah.
with like the headliner coming down. You're like
Right.
taping it up with duct tape, and you're
Your
pulling the window
feet.
up, and your Volkswagen Rabbit, you're pulling the window up,
Right.
like put in there.
Your feet would get wet if it rained.
You could see the floor. You can see
Yeah.
the road through the floor.
Road. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something really liberating about, because so much of money, and certainly like anything related to financial planning of the future, feels like grasping for certainty, like really trying to like draw a 30-year line that's going to be perfect. There's something very liberating about understanding that, like, sure, that 30-year line's valuable, whatever, but we know it's wrong. And then understanding that, like, maybe I could devote that energy to being better about navigating uncertainty, right? Like, if something shows up, I've now figured out, well, in the NASA example, it's going to take us 9 months to sort it out. You figured out, like, okay, it's Friday. On Sunday, I'm going to start doing like, we'll figure it out. Like, there's something really liberating about the idea of, like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to need to do next, but I know how to figure it out when I don't know. Right. There's
Yeah.
something really beautiful about that.
Yeah, and to apply it to money too, right?
Yeah.
To know that okay, you're going to
We'll
find
figure
a
it out.
way. You're going to figure it out. And that also you can call on yourself to stop spending money.
Yeah.
That you will do it, right? You will
Yeah.
do it. You will like slow down the burn.
Right.
Um
Yeah. What happens if this? Well, we'll cut back, and I'll go do this, and I'll go, like, I'll get underneath the tractor and get the wrench out, like from your earlier
yep,
stuff with your dad.
right, and you'll fix it and you'll do it. But I think that
Yeah.
that there's two levers, right? There's the accelerant and there's the brake, right? Like there's make more income
Right.
and
Get
there's
more margin.
spend less, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think being able to do both of those,
Yeah.
yeah. And my folks are so good at that brake, so good at the
Yeah.
brake. Like dad
Yeah.
turns 85. I'm like, Dad, you can have a new car. He's never bought a new car.
Right.
I'm like, you can have a new car. You don't have to drive the Buick anymore. It has 100,000 miles on it. He says, yeah, but I just put new tires on it.
Right. 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 Of course. Of course. It's so good. Well, Susan, thank you for doing this. Let me ask you just one final question I'm curious about. Let's pretend like there's a version of you 20 years ago, or let's do this. Let's say you're mentoring somebody who's 25, very similar to you when you were 25. And let's pretend like I'm still doing this show in 20 years and I have her on,
Eh,
so she's
or him.
20 years from now. And I ask her, like, what do you hope she learned? What would you hope somebody would learn from you about money?
You're going to figure it out. You're going to figure it out.
That's really great.
You're going to be okay. You're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
You got it. Keep breathing.
Yeah. Amen, Susan. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat about this.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I am still thinking about Susan's phrase, ego candy, or that moment that we talked about in the introduction when her dad sat on the porch with watermelon juice dripping down his chin and turned to his son and said, "Bitter, isn't it?" These are the moments that live behind the spreadsheets, the ones that shape how we carry money and purpose into our lives. Maybe that's what Susan reminded us of today, that you can do deeply meaningful work on your own terms, that a little thrift and a lot of hustle can go a long way, and that when things get uncertain, just keep breathing. You'll figure it out.
The views, information, or opinions expressed in the series are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Chip and Joanna Gaines, Binel Audio, nor Magnolia.